that as vice chair, he may be chair next year because I think it's important that everybody go through the chairs. So I'll do it this year and we'll see what happens next year. So, approval of the agenda as circulated. Councillor Coleman, Councillor Laferriere. Any additions? All those in favor? Now, another chairman's remark. I hope I'm not going to offend anybody because I'm going to call you all by your first names. Is that okay, rather than Councillor this or Councillor that?
We have 4 Johns.
Well, John 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll point right at you. It's a little bit awkward sometimes to say councillors, so we'll just see how that goes. Okay, John? Okay, sorry. Okay, then there's a provision for the declaration of pecuniary interest, and everybody knows what that's all about, and you can do so at the time. Okay, we have delegations. First, we have a delegation from the Emblem Corporation, and I've got Nick Dean, Adam Sapiria, Jeff Keys, and Tim Andrews. I'm not sure who's going to be the spokesman, but if there's anyone else. Okay. Okay, I'll let you introduce your colleagues to the committee, and you have 10 minutes to make your presentation, and hopefully there will be some opportunity for some questions of clarification after your presentation. You have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for your time and for allowing us the opportunity to speak with you tonight. We're here from Emblem. We're a licensed producer of cannabis located on Woodsley Avenue in Paris. My name is Adam Sapiria. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer. I'm joined by Jeff Keys, who's our General Manager, and Tim Andrews, who's our Vice President and Creative Director.
Thank you. Just to give some background on our facility, we've been here since 2014. We've currently are operating in a building which is 25,000 square foot, and we're in the process of opening up our expansion, which is another 30,000 square foot. Currently, our staffing-wise, we have 65 employees that are on staff right now. We're looking at hiring another 15 within the next 2 weeks, and we're going to continue to grow. We're currently 1 shift, and we'll be looking at putting on secondary shifts as we keep progressing. So currently in our facility, as the ones that came for a tour you've seen, we are doing cultivation there. We're also processing for medical and recreational, and we are doing research and development at the facility also. Just for the safety parts of it, just to keep everybody informed, we do have security that's on site 24/7. We have over 150 cameras covering every inch of that facility with the exception of change rooms, obviously. And overall, we've invested over $30 million so far in this facility.
A little bit of background about cannabis. So medical cannabis has actually been legal in Canada since 2001. It was through people had the ability to apply to Health Canada and grow for themselves or to designate someone to grow on their behalf. That changed in 2014 when we brought in licensed producers like Emblem, where it was the first time it was grown on a commercial scale and sold directly to patients by mail order who had a prescription from their doctor. So right now, Emblem sells directly to patients. Patients who have a prescription will send it into Emblem and will ship out, again, by Canada Post or by courier. For non-medical or for the recreational sales that came into effect on October 17th, in the province, they're all sold online through the Ontario Cannabis Store. So Emblem, as one of the licensed producers, will ship to the OCS wholesaler, and they will distribute online. That's changing on April 1st, 2019, that they'll actually allow for private retail in the province of Ontario. Currently, only what's allowed is dried flower, so the bud, or cannabis oils. So right now, Emblem sells cannabis oils. We sell oil-filled capsules, and we sell metered dose oral sprays, all containing oil. And we see the future of the industry really being in non-smokable forms, focusing more on the derivative formulations to avoid having to smoke or ingest the product.
Thank you.
So for the on-site retail opportunity, in Ontario, licensed producers are allowed to have one retail store on-site, and Emblem is seeking to establish a store at our secure facility on Woodsley. Some of the benefits of the retail stores include, and one of the key ones is providing opportunities for public education. It also allows access to safe, legal products and a transparent process. It ensures cannabis is sold with age restrictions, strict security and advertising limits, all set out and exceeding Health Canada regulations. And also another key, a key benefit is reducing the prevalence of the illegal market and the associated crime.
As a municipality, and why we're here speaking with council today, is that every municipality has until January 22nd, 2019 to opt out of private cannabis retail. The government has, the provincial government has allocated a pool of $40 million to begin, and I believe your legal counsel is going to be giving a presentation later on. But there, if a municipality chooses to opt out now, their funding is limited at $10,000. And that money can help go towards enforcement costs, be it bylaw officers or other items that are required for the cannabis enforcement piece. My understanding from your council's report is that under the current regime, should the county opt in, you'd be entitled to $35,000 this year, or about $36,000. In terms of the reasons to opt in and why we're asking council to opt in, again, as Tim mentioned, giving residents access to public education and access to legal product. No doubt there are people who are using cannabis. By allowing them to purchase safe legal product, you're taking that sale away from the illegal market, making sure they're getting access to product that's been overseen by Health Canada. It's been laboratory tested. We know there's no mold, there's no illegal pesticides, and no other contaminants. Allow for more jobs. As Jeff said, our staff count continues to grow, and by allowing a store on site, it'll allow us to offer additional an additional variety of jobs from the education, sales, inventory, processing piece. Again, we are in Paris. That name has a fair amount of cachet to it, and we certainly see an opportunity to potentially drive tourism if we can have a store on site. Much in the way that you see wineries having a small store on site, there may be an opportunity for tourism in the county. Again, there's an opportunity for funding and to get money for some of those costs that frankly are going to be incurred either way. There will be costs incurred with implementing the regulations relating to cannabis, and so the county might as well benefit from the additional funding from that provincial fund. And we're here because, as we have for the past 4 years, we're interested in working closely with council and with the town and the county to set up a store that is mindful of the community, that people can be proud of, that you don't have to have concerns about who's going in or what they're buying. And so really our goal here is to engage with council and with the greater community to make sure everyone's aware of what's happening and design the store and design the education piece in a way that is mindful of everyone's concerns. We wanted to keep it brief and, of course, leave some time for questions, so thank you very much for your time. And I know many of you had an opportunity to come and visit our facility. For those of you who haven't, the door is always open. Jeff and his incredible team can take you through what is really a pharmaceutical-grade facility. For those of you who are there, you're fully gowned up. It's a clean facility. Everyone's in gloves, masks, full suits. There's no contaminants. Every fraction of a gram of product is tracked through a system that is monitored by Health Canada. So you can rest assured that any cannabis going in, being produced and going out is being tracked, is clean, is safe, and let's give the residents of Paris and Brant County the access to the same appropriate product. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes your presentation. Thank you. Council members, or committee members, this is an opportunity for questions of clarification. What it isn't is a opportunity for discussion or debate. That can happen afterwards. So if you have questions of clarification, it's important that you understand what the delegation has put forward. Mark.
I have two questions of clarification. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation and for allowing a tour for many of us who went. I'm not sure how many went and how many weren't unable to, but it was really informative. I went with Councillor Howes, and we met probably about 30 of the 65 employees that you have. We met chemists, horticulturalists, agriculturalists, customer service reps, shipping specialists, security professionals, maintenance, and current and former employees have been in touch with us since when we were discussing it on social media. I'm just wondering, are there any other categories of employee I'm missing from that? And I ask because I do think there is some wonder about who's working at a cannabis grow, and there might be some chance to debunk some of the myths out there.
The only area that is not on that list is our distribution channel, our supply chain. That group has just started to grow right now. We've got 6 people in that department, and we are looking at increasing the headcount in supply chain as we keep growing across Canada. Right now we're providing mostly to the west, except for medical, which is across Canada. But as we get into more opportunities with the east, we'll be increasing that staff number.
And what's your estimate of hiring projections if we are able to opt in and you are able to have a retail outlet as well? Do you know how many jobs that would be bringing to this area?
It's a good question. Again, it's going to depend on the size of the store and some of the qualifications. I'd say we're looking at least another 10 to 20 people just for the store itself. That would be my sort of approximation.
Excellent, thank you. And last question, to a person, when I discussed our trip online to visit, people who are customers that I know, I didn't know they were customers of yours, to a person, the medical customers all said that while other cannabis operations were jumping on retail and abandoning their medical folks, Emblem was one of the bright spots that didn't, that you've kept your supply chain for those medical customers. My question, they've asked me to ask, is if you do get into this retail side, how are you going to maintain the medical side for those people who utilize this as medicine and make sure that there isn't a disruption in that supply chain?
That's a great question. I think that comes down to the philosophy of the company. And for us, while there is an opportunity on the retail side, we've always been a medical first company. The 30,000 square foot product innovation center that Jeff touched upon is dedicated to scientific formulation and the research of more advanced cannabinoid-based medications. We've always said medical should come first. People who are looking for this as a medicine, who rely on it for chronic pain, for epilepsy, for PTSD, people who are using it to migrate off of heavier prescription drugs, their needs need to come first. And so that was a goal that we set out from the beginning, and it's a commitment that we're going to maintain going forward, that medical patients should come first, and that will trump any other opportunities.
So for local medical folks, they're going to be able, if we allow retail, to come directly to you as the source and get that service? So
if they have a prescription, they would still go through the medical route, because whether they have coverage through insurance, whether they want to include it as a medical expense for tax purposes. But if someone is coming if they want to buy it at the store for medical purposes, they're certainly allowed to.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions? Seeing, yes, I've got a blind spot on the corners. Sorry, Joan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're asking the County of Bryan to opt in, and just to clarify, if we opt in, then you wouldn't be the only retail store in the county, because once we opt in, any number of stores could apply to have a retail private outlet within the County of Bryan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And whether we have 2 stores or 10 stores, we would just get the $36,000 that you mentioned?
Correct. So right now the fund is a fixed amount, and it's allocated by county.
Thank you.
David Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 questions. First one, Emblem has been around 4.5 years. Jeff, I know you started this year. I don't know, Adam and Nick, how long you guys been with them, but have you had any complaints since you started? Have you been a good corporate citizen of the county?
So I can tell you I've been at the company for 4.5 years. I first toured the facility when it was being converted from Heritage Poultry, and that was in July of 2014. There's never been a single complaint. I think for those of you who toured, there's no smell from the cannabis production, frankly, until you actually walk into a growing room. I'm not aware of any sort of complaints that have ever been voiced. In terms of being a good corporate citizen, there are a lot of initiatives that we've participated in quite quietly. We've always been of the mindset that we're not here to advertise our company or the use of cannabis. So from a community perspective, we've been involved in a number of probably prevent anybody from even attempting to enter and cause any sort of issue.
Okay, thank you. Second question, maybe you know, maybe you don't. If you go for a retail store on your property, is it zoned already for a retail, or would you have to go through the planning process? And I'm asking that because if you go through the planning process, the people around there, they'd have a say, and if you don't, I'm not sure, and maybe you guys don't know either at this point. Do you know if you'd have to get it rezoned?
I don't know that at the moment.
Okay. I can ask our head of planning later. Okay, thank you.
John Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, couple things. Thank you for your presentation there. I did miss the tour, but I'd like to see the facility. I've heard a lot of what you were saying there. Never a complaint. Down 4.5 years, and there's still people who have no idea you're there. Yeah, you spoke a few times about education. If we opt in, there'll be education for the public and this sort of thing. Is there any sort of education that you guys are doing or are going to do or have thought about doing, even if we don't opt in?
Absolutely. So as I said, Emblem has been around for about 4.5 years, and for the past 3.5 years, we've operated a division called GrowWise Health, and that is exclusively focused on patient and physician education. We have a team of registered nurses across Ontario and across Canada that provide counseling on safety, appropriate usage, side effects, everything associated with safe use of cannabis. And so there's education opportunities that we can offer regardless. Obviously, it would be our goal to be able to do that as part of an integrated education and retail piece. And there's a way for us through our trained staff, through our customer service team, through having those people on site to create sort of a more wholesome education program. But yeah, we've been sort of doing some very detailed education pieces for the past 3.5 years.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, John Bell.
Yeah, I made that tour. I really enjoyed it. It tends to throw me off the question that's at hand. And the question really is about retail rather than the processing and production of it. You showed us the benefits of a retail store. What in your mind would be the reason for us to opt out, and why shouldn't we?
If you want the honest answer, I'd say I'm not sure if there is a reason to opt out. I think if the concern has to do with people using cannabis, people are going to use cannabis regardless. And rather than send them out of the county to go somewhere else, to a retail store, or send them back to their illegal dealer who's getting it from who knows where, who's growing it under who knows what conditions. I think what this does is, this is not about advertising or encouraging cannabis use. What this is about is giving those who choose to use cannabis responsibly a safe place to purchase it, knowing that they're buying it under the right conditions. So in the research that we've seen, there's no increased use of cannabis. Our goal is not to create a site that people are going to come and hang out and smoke. What it is meant to do is to provide a reasonable space for adults who responsibly choose to use cannabis to purchase it from a safe spot.
Steve?
Echoing just how impressive the tour was, and it really was, and it triggers me to ask the question, you mentioned the winery model as a kind of a vision or a way for us all to kind of visualize the direction you hope to go in, and pairing that with the fact that it's an impressive tour, but a secure tour. Is there, in your vision, is there a way to tour people through or give visibility to the quality of your place and the security without obviously traipsing people through like they go through a winery? I just wondered what the vision was for that. Thank you.
Sure, so there may be some interesting ways. I think to your point, we can't have every single consumer go through a gown and go through a full tour. depending on the provincial legislation, if there is a way for us to give some sort of interactive tour to guests who are interested, allow them to see the facility and how the product is grown, how it's manufactured, how it's distilled. If there's an opportunity for that, we'd certainly be open to that. And if there are opportunities to give tours to select individuals, we're open to that as well. So I think that comes down to how do you create that educational experience, and how do we use technology to our advantage to give people some insight into how it's grown and how it's produced, without necessarily taking them on a fully gowned tour.
Yeah, and that could be through a virtual tour in the retail location, so people visiting could get a sense of the whole facility and how the cannabis is produced in that retail environment, and again, support that education piece.
Okay, I think that is the end of the questions. Once again, thank you for the presentation. If you wouldn't mind, there may be questions that arise at some other time. Could you leave with the clerk a contact person if someone has questions that they can be contacted at the appropriate time? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
And we have another delegation. John Kemp is here to talk about mitigating giant hogweeds along the Grand River.
Thank you. It's an awesome opportunity for me to present to the council. I appreciate it. Thank you. So some of you have a handout with some pictures on it. I put that together at the last minute so you get an idea of what the issues are. There's also a large poster that helps to describe what the plant looks like. So the history on this, around 2012 I saw that poster while I was preparing some activities for the Scouts, and realized that we really needed to pay attention to this. It's our kids are going to have to grow up knowing about giant hogweed like we do about poison ivy. And then I found out that most people don't even know what poison ivy looks like, so we have a problem. We need to deal with it. So I went on a hunt and with some friends and discovered through contact at Grand River Optin that there was some giant hogweed, and we went and found it. And on the last page of that little handout, you'll see a picture of me in a little white suit and a giant hogweed plant in an aquarium. So we dug it up, and we took it to Clayton Thomas, the weed inspector, and he confirmed that we had the right animal. So we began earnestly searching for them, and we put together a team of individuals on volunteer time to scour the banks of the river looking for them. And the first few years we didn't find too much. 2013 I presented the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters giant hogweed workshop in downtown Brantford. Again in 2014 we did that. There's been a couple articles in the paper. So the population of weeds has been increasing. Originally we found one plant, then we found two, and then we found 5. Now we're up to about 15 sites, that is. And one of them in particular, an island, which I think is actually a sandbar near Glen Morris, has a population of about 150 mature plants, all fully in seed, which creates about probably close to 20 or 30 million seeds, which float and they go downstream. And they park themselves along the shoreline during a high water eddy, so in the springtime they'll all spread. Some of them will grow, not too many. The germination rate is very small for this plant, but with such a high number of seeds, it still becomes a problem. Last summer we had a group of Scouts was out and found what they thought was a giant hogweed, so they reported that to me and some friends, and we went out the following week and found, sure enough, there was 7 giant hogweed plants growing right alongside the S.C. Johnson Trail, across from, actually it's diagonally across from the Grand River Rafting Putout, if you know where that is. And we went and went down by canoe, found it. There were the 7 plants that were mature in bloom with seed heads. I took those out, took about an hour and a half, and the fun part was that yes, it was 12 feet off the S.C. Johnson Trail, but some people who liked the beach had walked right through the middle of the plants to make a campfire and trampled the plants down. So somewhere there are some people with some serious burns, and they probably don't know why. So that's the history in the present condition. Another issue we have is with landowners. The landowners are legally responsible to remove the giant hogweeds that are on their property. Most landowners don't know they have giant hogweed because it grows in an area on their property that they have no desire to go to. It's usually on the mucky, wet spot along the river. It's hard to walk. It's sometimes submerged. In the summertime, it's usually not very pleasant, so why go there? So we can see it from the river. People who like to walk along the shore, like fishermen or explorers, or people who are tubing and go ashore for a picnic, they might find it. So we need to help the landowners to find their giant hogweed. So that's where the volunteers have come in. We find it from the river. Some people find it by walking the unofficial trails along the edge. So we put together an action plan, which is what I sent out as my solicitation of interest. I think most of you will have that as an email attachment. It goes through the process of identifying the tasks, detailing who would do what and when, and what we're looking for is people who are willing to partnership with the project. So far we've got about 8 participants. The Grand River Conservation Authority is involved. They've shared their information with us. They've helped quite a bit. They came out to one of my presentations in Brantford. They've given me good indications on how to remove the product or the plant safely. I'm thinking about weed here, the wrong weed. I was calling product. We don't want it to be a product here. So we have the Grand River Rafting and the Grand Experiences personnel. They're all on the watch for it, but they only get to see it when it's too late. They'll see it in July or August when it's, it's magnificent, it's huge, it's in bloom. Well, it's a bit late to fix it. We can capture the seeds, or we can stop its growth or its spread at that point, but we can't eliminate the plant at that time. When we have to eliminate the plant is early in the spring, typically in late April and early May. If we don't have it taken care of by June, then it's hard to find and it's really awkward to deal with because it's hot. Wearing a hazmat suit in the hot sun is tedious, and you have to be fully covered or you'll get burned. I got burnt last summer taking off the hazmat suit because I did it wrong, and I managed to touch the inside or outside of the suit onto my arm on the way off. So what we're specifically looking for from Grant County would be some assistance in identifying who landowners might be. We can find the plants, and we have people who can help us to positively identify that it's the right plant. And we can identify where it is along the river with GPS coordinates and photographs and maps. But we don't know who owns that piece of dirt. And if we go to the office, it costs us some fee for each request. And we're hoping we can get some assistance with that. We're also looking for maybe a little help on the politics side or the legal side. How do we deal with property that isn't owned by anyone? In particular, the Sandbar and Glen Morris, and there's other little islands like that. The GRCA doesn't own them. No one wants to step forward and say, that's my land, I'll take care of it. So we need some help with that. We're also looking for some information that Bryan County may have regarding previously reported sites. The only sites we have reported so far are the ones from GRCA and the ones that I've found. The other ones aren't necessarily public information, so I'm not privy to them, but I'm requesting that we could get that information so we can put it in the pool and we can properly deal with them all at one time. It's a limited time of the year to do it. We've only got about a week or two, maybe 3 in late April, early May, and then about a week and a half or 2 weeks in July. That's it, so we can't spend too much time looking for ownership after we find the plant. We've got to find it, find out who it is, get it dealt with, and then wait for our next opportunity. So that's really what I have. On the handout that you've seen, you have got some point notes on the page 2. Page 1 shows the burn, and it takes a long time to go away. Poison ivy typically takes about 3 weeks or so with some medication, and you may have repeats. This one here, we're talking about 9 days or so before it stops weeping and heals up. and then you may have a stain or a burn for months. Sometimes the stain comes back when it gets exposed to sunlight. It's called photodermatitis. The second picture, that was taken near Glen Morris. And the last page with the really, really big plants, that wasn't actually here, that was in British Columbia. It's the same plant. That's a stock photo. And the bottom picture on the right with the two weeds. One is a giant hogweed that's growing out of the water, so it starts off submerged. It really likes to be wet. And that one's about 2 feet across in late April. By 24th of May weekend, it'll be 1 meter tall. So a young child could run into it and be covered head to foot. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Again, the opportunity for questions, clarification at this point. Steve?
Thank you for your presentation. It's eye-opening. And they have, with people coming down the Grand River specifically, is much, much bigger than most of us realize. The numbers are staggering and impressive. I know you've got the efforts to try and get rid of the plants. Have you had any dialogue with those outfitters about educating their customers to watch out for the ones that you don't get rid of?
Yes, it's a touchy subject because we don't want to scare away the general public. So having a 5-minute presentation at the beginning of their rafting trip on watch out for giant hogweed, it kind of goes against business sense. But the guides that go with the boats, they're fully versed. They know what it looks like, and if they see some, they've been reporting it to me. That's where I get most of the reports from, and then I go out to confirm them later. So I've had reports from Grand Experiences and Grand River Rafting and some private individuals. With the outfitters, they tend to know what it looks like. So when I get a report from them, it's about 80% right. When I get a phone call from somebody in the general public, it's about 10% right. Usually it's Angelica.
Bryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good presentation, and as a landowner along the river, I'm well aware of what the problem is. Have you used drone technology in helping spot this?
Have not used drones.
Could it be used?
Definitely.
Thank you.
Joan, and then David.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp, for your presentation. You referred to we several times throughout your presentation. Did you initiate this project on your own, or who's the we?
The we would be me and my friends. So yes, I initiated this project on my own. We do not have a particular organization established at this time. As part of this purpose here is that this is bigger than me, so we need to establish a formal group so that we can properly manage the activities.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's great that you're concerned, because it is a very debilitating plant when you get mixed up with it. And when I looked
again,
at
Joan, we're just asking questions of clarification at this point. We can discuss it later.
Thank
David?
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to John. Yeah, John, again, I applaud your efforts. So far, from what I see, it looks like it's just along the Grand River so far that...
Well, the plant likes to have wet feet.
Yeah.
The biggest concentration in Ontario is actually in the Halton region, because back in the 70s there was a nursery selling the plant, because truly it's an awesome plant. You have one of those in your yard, everybody talks about it. But then you want rid of it because it burns your hands, so you throw it in the garbage and it starts to grow. Yeah. So the Grand River is actually not heavily infestated at this time. There was a large population near the Shan Dam, which Grand River Conservation Area took out, but of course it has some seeds floating, so it seeded the riverbed. A few of them grew, and we're recovering from that. Every time there's a flood, the seeds get redistributed. The seeds float, and they can float for 3 days before they sink, and they can stay viable on the dirt for up to 7 years. So if we get a flood every 5 or 6 years, we got to keep looking for it. So this is an ongoing problem.
But so far, like, there's a few areas of the county that are quite swampy all year round, but so far nothing, say out in Ward 4 around the Burford area, Cathcart area, they got a few swamps.
The seeds are large, about the size of a pumpkin seed, so there's not too many birds that will bother carrying them. So they usually only travel by mice or by wind. They don't go too far.
Okay.
Usually when we find the giant hogweed, it's like a monoculture, or there's one plant with a few sprouts around it. It's pretty tight together.
Okay, that's a good thing then. Thank you.
Mark?
Thanks again, and through you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation, great efforts. A lot of your requests from the county are around information sharing and a little bit of fee deferment. I'm wondering if you mentioned Halton and you mentioned BC in your presentation. Are there other groups of individuals or more established groups that have worked out similar agreements with municipalities that you know of?
I don't know of any municipalities that have been involved. I know that Halton Region has region staff, like the GRCA has staff that go out and deal with it. But I don't know of any effort that is multi-agency.
Mm-hmm. And is there any concern around, and maybe this is a question I'll have to ask staff in our legal department later, but is the issue around privacy of those landowners and another private citizen knowing their information?
There might be. That's why I blacked out all the names and addresses on the report. I know what they are, and no one else does, because it's not their business.
Right, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any final questions? Seeing none, thanks, John, for the information, and we will try to deal with the delegations at this point. So, that concludes the delegations, and now it's time to, I don't like this word, but it's disposition. Are we saying we're going to dispose of the delegations? It's got to be a better word than that. How do you wish to deal with the first delegation with regard to the cannabis? Joan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's my understanding that there is a report coming forward about this matter on the December 18th council meeting from the county solicitor. So I would suggest that we defer this item to that particular report that will be coming forward in 8 days' time.
And I'll take that as a motion. Do I have a seconder?
Yes.
Mark, any questions to the resolution?
Mr. Chair, pardon me, that's on this evening's agenda, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then we're going to refer it, we'll discuss it further at that point. So the resolution is to defer the delegation until such time as we discuss the legal report, which is later this evening. It's moved, seconded. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. You'll have a chance to discuss it later this evening. Now, John Kemp's delegation with regard to the giant hogweed. David?
I like what Mr. Kemp's doing. I support what he's doing. He's not asking a whole lot, but again, there's might be some questions outstanding. And Mark, you mentioned privacy, and I was thinking the same thing. So what I would ask, Mr. Chair, is that we refer it to staff. Maybe they could look into it a little bit and find out, well, what we have to do to share that information if we can, and then report back to us.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Bryan? Comments or questions to the motion? John?
Thank you. Through you, I'm just wondering if possible to add a friendly amendment to that in the sense of let's see what is out there potentially to help them out financially as well.
And that would be part of the staff report. That
I just want to make sure that that's part of it, though. Yeah.
I was going to say the same as John.
Okay. And there's also, when we refer to staff, conservation authorities, I know they're up on this. I know Long Point is active, and GRCA, I suspect, is as well. And there's another, I don't know where I read this, but there's a provincial initiative, environmental initiative, that is promoting how to deal with invasive species, so that may fall into it as well. So there's the resolution. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. So we'll get a staff report on that, and we'll hear about, we'll discuss further the emblem resolution later this evening. And that disposes of the delegations. Now, Education session. When I first saw this, I was a little bit horrified to think that we're going to deal with all this all at once. I'm just going to ask the CAO, how much time are we going to allot to each of the educational sessions, presentations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. You know, there's two options. The general managers are prepared to provide these presentations. Alternatively, if it was a committee's will, we can just answer any questions about the presentations. They were distributed. They are a fairly high-level presentation. My direction to the general managers was to provide basically an introduction of who you are and what you do. Obviously, the committee members will learn more about the departments through the budget process as well. So we're happy to act in either way, whether you would like us to quickly go through the presentations or I could just give a high-level summary and we could answer any questions. So.
Okay, hearing that, I've got a suggestion. And why don't we allot maybe 5 minutes to each of the A, B, C, D, E, and F, and allow the staff members to come forward and just give a 2 minutes of introduction and then 3 minutes of questions, and then we'll move on, recognizing that they're always available for questions, and you do have copies of the presentations before us. But it would be nice to maybe hear from the directors at this point. So let's start. Michael Bradley, the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and then as per your direction, I will be quite quick through this. The CAO's office is, I think all of you are quite familiar with the CAO's office, having heard Mr. Dean and Mr. Belchamber talk about the CAO as an appointed role. I do report directly to council, and I oversee senior staff, and the general managers, the county solicitor, and the county clerk report to me. The county's laid out in a structure that the CAO has departments reporting. Each department has various divisions reporting up to it, and then sections report into divisions. And you'll see that over the course of the evening. And there is our senior management team there, and you'll be meeting them later this evening. We're using these pictures, and I apologize, the titles got cut off at the bottom of these pictures. I will distribute a more archaic org chart later this evening. But I just will say that these pictures are feed off of our intranet system, which all of you will be able to access shortly, and it has an interactive org chart tool, so you'll be able to trace anyone, look for anyone in the organization once that tool is available to you. I talked about the CAO's office. The county clerk's division looks after the county's, the committee and council cycle, is the chief returning officer for the Municipal Elections Act, and oversees our records program. And our solicitor, who you'll be hearing from later this evening, oversees the county's legal affairs and provides legal advice to both the senior team as well as to yourselves here at council. We have a good a very seasoned and strong senior management team, and a very talented group of people, and some other points here that you can refer to later. We have a number of challenges, including maintaining that team and also looking after our assets, facilitating growth, which we've talked a lot about already, and in a very dramatically changing communications landscape. So these are challenges amongst many others you'll hear from us as we go forward. We've had lots of strategic initiatives. I won't go through them, but there's lots of things we've done to make sure that the organization is optimized over the last few years, and many to come. So that's our contact information. And with that, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions.
That was exactly 2 minutes. That's just what we want to see from all of you.
There's one person that can pull that off. That would be me.
So. Now, we got 3 minutes for questions. So a couple ground rules. Everybody probably has dozens of questions. Be judicious in your questions, and we'll try and pick and choose. And if you're not recognized, save your questions for later. Steve's right off the hop here. First question.
We hear the words talent crisis in various places. Can you give a little more detail of how that relates to the county?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, and through you, the talent crisis is something you're going to hear a lot of as you go into some of your municipal conferences. The municipalities are no different than many other organizations right now. Our talent crisis is fueled partly by retirement. There's a lot of retirement rolling through the public sector right now. It's creating a lot of opportunity for other employees. And with that also, there's just a shortage of employees, especially in the professions and in what I would call the challenged recruitment areas, planning, engineering, accounting, finance, and goes through right into the trades. So, to recruit a senior level position, we see certainly much smaller responses to our recruitment initiatives. So that's our talent crisis. And it's very common in certainly the municipal sector and in many other sectors right now.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just very quickly, with the staffing review that we completed, or you guys completed in 2016, can you just give us a quick idea of, and I understand that there, I know that there was a lot of additional staff being hired. Are we on track with where we thought we were going to be with that hiring, or are we a little ahead, a little behind?
Sure. Certainly, Mr. Chair, very quickly, we did a staffing review. It identified the county as a very lean organization. It's something that we're proud of, but also a challenge for us. So we have been upstaffing and we're doing our best. Space is an issue for us, as we'll talk about later this evening. But generally, I think we have, and with council support, been trying to fill up some what I would call key gap areas in the organization.
Okay, a final question for Michael. Joan?
Yes, thank you. You mentioned the talent crisis, and I wondered if you have a department-wide succession planning plan for our county to promote from within to help assist with the talent crisis.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. And we don't have what I would call a fully written succession plan, but I think even the last reorganization that was approved by council earlier this year, you'll note that we did a lot of promoting from within through that and have continued to do that. So it is, we are doing that. We've had a lot of initiatives over the last few years to improve our succession planning. We did a fairly significant leadership initiative. We do lots of training in-house. We have we encourage people to pursue educational pursuits, and we provide support financially for that. So we have a lot of initiatives to support succession planning.
Okay, again, Michael is available for questions at any time, so I'm going to move now to, and if you did have your hand up, I apologize, but we're going to run through this fairly quickly, and recognizing that you can ask the same questions to Michael at any time, except not this time, because Robin is going to make a presentation.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. I'm Robin Hewitt, General Manager of Corporate Services. I think I have met everybody, but just to clarify. So Corporate Services, our department provides critical support services to the rest of the organization, including financial services, human resources, insurance, real estate, and business and technology services. The department also provides municipal bylaw enforcement to the residents. So this is our team. We have 4 divisions in the department. We have legal and property services, which is separate from the county solicitor, who is under the CAO. We also have human resources, the finance and treasury, and the business and technology solutions. So as general manager, my role is to implement the direction and strategies of council and the CAO. Also to provide guidance and aid to the council in their decisions, and to provide guidance and direction to the directors whose pictures were just up there, excuse me. Also undertake special projects and oversee the county's investment portfolio. So under legal and property services, we have municipal bylaw enforcement, insurance, real estate, and then a multitude of small sort of unrelated items, such as the livestock compensation program, lottery licensing, noise exemptions, etc. So under finance, we have Heather Mifflin, who is our Director of Finance. She's also the County Treasurer, which is one of the positions that is a requirement under the Municipal Act. There's a whole host of things that they look after in there, including property tax, which is, the biggest thing really for the county. Accounts receivable, payable, payroll, benefits. I don't really need to read the list. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then business and technology solutions. So we've divided this division into 2 sections, one being business solutions and the other being technology solutions. And their duties range from help desk, project management, GIS, right through to the more technology-oriented items such as desktop support, network administration, and disaster recovery. So key assets, we have a very competent, dedicated, and talented staff, and I'm proud to say that we have a culture of community and collaboration. We really do have a fantastic group of people. We have undertaken recent service reviews for both bylaw enforcement and business and technology solutions, which has improved our service delivery. Critical challenges, some of these Michael already touched on: maintaining and retaining employees dealing with workload increases and location challenges, space planning management during a time of rapid growth, impending retirements, and rapidly changing legislative requirements, and a shift in e-business demands from the public with changing demographics. I also want to mention one of the things we do to promote our staff from within is we have a mentoring program, which many people here are part of. So under best management strategic initiatives, we led the staffing review in 2016, which Michael touched on. Again, the business and technology solutions strategic plan, and the development charges background study, which is underway, and you're going to get an education session on that in January. And marketing of the county's insurance program last year, which is saving us $100,000 in the budget this year. And this is just the contact information for the directors.
Okay.
Okay.
Exactly 2 minutes again. Amazing. Questions? And again, I'll preface this by saying that there is opportunity at any time to ask questions, and it seems like we may be rushing through this, but I know that these issues will come up from time to time, and this won't be the last time we're going to be hearing from our general manager. So are there any questions? We got 3 minutes. Okay.
Okay,
well
thank
done.
you.
Cindy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Cindy Stevenson. I am the General Manager of Community and Protective Services. I've been with the county for 14 years now. Most of my time has been in the Human Resources Department, but I took on this new role back in September. So our department includes recreation and community development, parks and facilities, fire services, and the Brantford Paramedic Service. And I supervise each director and chief from these divisions, as well as our administrative coordinator. This is an organization chart for us, and this shows all the faces of our directors. So our department serves residents of Brant and Brantford. We provide recommendations to council through various committees, and I also act as the staff liaison for the Police Services Board. Our Recreation and Community Development Division, we oversee or deliver recreation programming for all ages, operate the Paris Community Pool and Scotland Community Center. We oversee the accessibility services. We liaise with the social services with the City of Brantford. We oversee the transit and mobility initiatives and are involved with various community development programs. Parks and Facilities Division operate 4 community centers, including ice and turf facilities, operate numerous parks, cemeteries, and many kilometers of trails, provide horticultural services, oversee facility bookings, and develop partnerships with various community groups. Our Fire Services Division, we deliver fire prevention services. We provide emergency response from 8 stations located across the county, and that is a volunteer service. We oversee the fire dispatch service, and we also oversee the county's emergency plan. Our Paramedic Service Division, this is a shared service with the City of Brantford, obviously delivering medical treatment for both areas, overseeing the community paramedicine program, providing medical coverage for special events, and participating in public relation initiatives. Key assets, this seems to be a theme with all of us. We have highly trained and dedicated team of staff and volunteers. We have an excellent reputation in program service delivery. We have plans for new facilities in many areas. Critical challenges, we have a rapidly increasing and aging population, which places additional service demands in each division. Another challenge is managing offload delays for our paramedic service at the Brantford General Hospital. We have aging and limited facilities to meet resident and staff needs and expectations. And we're also facing climate change with respect to preparing for emergency responses and preserving our natural areas. Best management and strategic initiatives. There have been a number of strategic plans done within this department and some underway listed there. I won't go through them all with you. And these are our contact information for our directors and chief and myself and administrative coordinator.
Questions? David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Cindy. Cindy, who liaises with social services?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Leslie Head, our Director of Recreation and Community Development, is our staff liaison.
And the reason I'm asking, because we had that affordable housing forum 2 weeks ago, and I just seen one county person there, and there was all kinds of city staff, so. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Joan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You, on page 58, it says you oversee the county's emergency plan. And earlier in the fall, I requested that council be briefed on the emergency plan. I believe all the staff were having a session about emergency planning and a mock emergency. The CAO at that time had suggested that when the new council is in and installed and we're at work, that we would have a session about the emergency plan, because if there was a tornado tomorrow, we wouldn't know what to do. So when is that session going to take place so that council can know our role in an emergency?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do recall that coming forward. We do not have a date, but I'll discuss that with the CAO and our emergency management manager.
Right, so that we could have something in the near future before we have a huge blizzard and this county gets shut down. Touch wood, it doesn't happen. Thank you.
Now that you mention it, it just might happen.
Yeah, exactly.
John?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you would, a comment rather than a question, but classic example of hiring expert staff from within.
Okay. Any other questions to the classic example? John?
Just a comment for the new mayor and the new councilors. This county does have a plan. If we have an emergency tomorrow, we are ready to go.
Of course
Not
we
to
do.
be worried.
Okay. And again, no more questions. Mark is on deck. Thanks, Cindy. And as we go through these, you can see that the booklets are becoming a complete encapsulation of the department. So hang on to these things. They're going to be invaluable at budget time especially. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. I'm Mark Pomponi, General Manager of Development Services. I started with the County of Brant about 15 and a half years ago as a planner, and like an infection from a giant hogweed, it's tough to get rid of me. So this is my department. We have the two front counter staff at the front, as well as Director of Planning, Rob Trotter, Don Cunningham, and Andre Gravel as a Chief Building Official. So what do we do? Basically, all growth flows through the Development Services Department. It begins with inquiries and pre-consultations on development applications, which happens in the Planning Department. Once it's approved, it goes through Development Engineering, where we look at the detailed engineering review, which is things like servicing and lock rating and drainage. And then finally, it's addressed, it's realized through the issuance of building permits, and that happens through the building division. The planning division, I'm not going to get into this too much. We talked quite a bit at it in our last meeting. But basically, applications come in, they get processed, they get circulated, and then they're brought forward to Planning Advisory Committee and Council for recommendations and actions and decisions. Once that happens, the detailed engineering review goes off to the engineering division. It begins with the commenting on Planning Act applications and continues after approvals, and the continuation after the approvals are in place could take many months or many years for that to be finalized. The purpose is to make sure that the engineering works on site before the county accepts it. We look at things like road design, stormwater management, servicing for water and sewage, and in some cases it involves capital works and dealing with other departments or divisions. Once that happens, we get an okay from the engineering division to start issuing building permits. At that point, this is where development's ultimately realized, and you're starting to see that happening now in the north end and the south end with building permit activity. And the intent of that is to review and make sure that there is compliance with the Ontario Building Code. The building division will oversee construction through inspections and make sure that it's okay to give a completion for final occupancy. The division also deals with things of enforcement nature. Disaster events such as fires may involve closing of buildings and preventing occupancy of buildings if it's unsafe conditions. So they can be called out at any time of the night, on the weekends, whenever, to do inspections. So within our division, as others have said, we have some very competent and seasoned staff. When you look at succession planning, we certainly are bringing in younger, talented people to come into to our department and are filling out some roles quite nicely. The other thing that I think we have as our strength is we have an excellent interdepartmental and agency working relationship. It's probably the strongest I've seen. I've been here 15 years, as I've said. Probably the strongest I've seen since I've been here. Great communication. As well, we've had great support from our council. Probably the best I've seen in years as well. We've had a lot of support through some of the initiatives and strategies we've been doing. But the other thing within our department, there is a commitment to improve. We're always looking at ways to improve things. We have working groups right now on looking at communications, notices, things like that, and how we can set that up to be much more effective, or any way we can get some more improvements on it. The challenges we have right now are meeting the demands and expectations that are associated with growth. And those demands are really come from a group of people. Council has expectations and demands upon staff, which is part of our job. The development community has demands and expectations with timeframes, getting their approvals in place, and the public being able to come in and express their concerns and have input into the planning and development process. As well, we have our own requirements, making sure that our own standards are met in terms of construction and engineering and those sorts of things. And we've had a number of strategic initiatives that have been going on. For the new members of council, we certainly had a development approvals review and process to look at our future needs and in anticipation of the growth that was coming. It identified that there are significant staff shortages, or there were, and some process changes. And we have been, were given some some points to implement, and we've pretty much implemented most of them. The most current one was the follow-up with a fee review in 2017 to find revenue sources. We're mostly complete. There are some other things that we're still working on, some that came through that review, the strategic review. Some of them are reworking of subdivision agreements, improvements on notifications. Low-impact development is something that is ongoing. Our staff are attending working group meetings in the area. And transfer review, which would pull some of the approvals from the province into the local municipal level. And that's a fairly involved process to go through, but we are working on that with our operations staff. And with that, my contact information. Any questions?
Questions? John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, back on slide 5, the engineering division. You talk of, begins with review of Planning Act applications, continues after approvals, could take many months or years. Somebody that's, watching and listening tonight on YouTube hears that this thing could take years. Can we just give an example of why something would take years? It's not the fact that we're not working on it. Just so, put some context behind that, years.
Yeah, sure. In some cases, development applications, I'll give Southwest Paris as an example. We had applications and inquiries and people beginning in processes many years ago. I'm going to say back when I started out as a planner in some cases. The problem there was infrastructure. So the development was held up because significant infrastructure improvements were made. At that time, council had the foresight of saying, why don't we invest in some of this infrastructure? And that got our Brant Business Park going. As a result of those initiatives, it allowed for this additional growth to occur. St. George is another one where you may have a couple thousand units that are proposed in St. George, but there's significant infrastructure that's required. And those processes, they started in, I guess, around 2008. But we still don't have a sewage treatment plant. There's significant area study work that had to be done. We had to look at the infrastructure needs, and we're going through EA processes right now to look at what is the ability, simulated capacity of creeks, and upgrading the sewage treatment plant. This is where we're working very closely with our operations staff to look at those issues, and they're leading the EA portion of it. So once this happens, you get into approval when you start actually get construction happening. So in a case like in Southwest Paris, you have infrastructure that's put in, such as roads, and then it goes into a maintenance period that could be 1 or 2 years. There's actually a report on tonight to accept some infrastructure. Once we're satisfied that the infrastructure is to our satisfaction, then we will assume it and it becomes our ownership. And that in itself could take a couple of years, or 3 or 4 years, or 5 years, depending on the developer.
Thank you for that, because I think it's important for people to understand the context behind the years. Thank you.
John and then Mark.
Yeah, it's a question, through the chair, it's a question, Mark, to you, but it's also to your colleagues. To what extent do you do benchmarking of your performance and processes? And can you give us some confidence that we're in the top class of service providers in municipalities in this area?
Well, I'd say we actually brought in a consultant to do that for us. When we had first BMA came in and looked at staffing needs throughout the county, then we had performance concept groups come in, and they actually went through and assessed our processes to look at what our timeframes were, if there was areas where we were lacking and improvements that were made. The biggest issues they found out of that was really staffing. We certainly had bottlenecks. There was no doubt about it. What that did is it identified how we benchmark with other municipalities in terms of staffing and the workload that was coming in, and showed that we were significantly understaffed. Then we took that, just to say a little bit more, we took that into the fee review, which then found a revenue source to pay for those staffing to come in to minimize any hits on the tax base.
Mark.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Mark, I saw your slide there about the competent and seasoned staff, and I have to agree. I was doing some research before the meeting today, looking at everybody's LinkedIn on staff and the rest, after some comments from some neighboring councils, elected officials in other regions, talking about how Brant poaches all their good staff, which I'm very proud of. How, in your opinion, how are we as a relatively small municipality, how are we able to be competitive in getting those very good staff, from what I'm hearing, from other regions that are much bigger than ours? What's the secret in Brant?
I'd say that it's funny, I get that similar question when we do interviewing. They ask me, why do you like working here? And I always say that we have an excellent working environment and some great staff. And it's throughout the corporation. And that's something that you develop a reputation for. Municipalities do develop reputations for their work environment. I mean, I've come from places, and we hear of other places where it's a terrible place to work. We have people who have taken pay cuts to come here. We've had people who have come from the private sector to come and work in development services, for sure. And I think part of it is a reputation, and I think also it's potentially opportunity. We're at a point where we are growing and expanding. And I think people, especially younger people coming in, have an opportunity to come in and expand their careers. And with certainly with the staff that we come in and we interview them, I often say to them is that our job descriptions are a starting point for their jobs. Some people come in with different skill sets and they have the ability to expand on them, and we exploit them whenever we can, and they certainly like that. And we've had, certainly one staff told me about a month ago that this is the best it's ever been in his career because he feels like he's his true self professionally, because we're giving him those opportunities to do the work that he thinks he's capable of doing, and he's doing a phenomenal job. So I
also noticed that, and I've read a lot of reports about the opposite at other municipalities, at the manager and director level, we actually have a majority women employees in that level, and a lot of municipalities are struggling with gender parity, let alone. I know there's been something made about only having one woman on council, but at our director and manager level, we're actually have a lot of really wonderful women working in those positions, and the gender parity is actually the majority female.
Sure, you just have to look to my left. And that's a great example of that. It's actually something I'm quite proud of. I think it's really great to see.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, and that having been said, we'll move to one of our women staff, our general managers, Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. My name is Allison Newton. I'm General Manager of Strategic Initiatives. Our department includes economic development, tourism and special events, communications and public relations, and corporate initiatives. Our org chart, Melissa Connor, who many of you have met, is the Supervisor of Communications and Public Relations, Russell Press, Director of Economic Development and Tourism, and Heather Madden, who is Administration and Coordination for the department. Economic development, tourism and special events, we use this quite broadly. Economic development, essentially at its core, is responsible for the facilitation of business growth and expansion and investment readiness activities, which really means any initiatives that we undertake that enhances the environment for investment for companies. Tourism, again, is used quite broadly. It includes not only traditional tourism, sporting events, group tours, etc. It also includes filming, corporate hosting, arts, culture, and heritage, which sometimes act as standalone, but so you know that they're all encompassed under that umbrella. Communications and public relations. They implement corporate-wide communications and media relations also, so they're internally and externally focused. They also focus on our branding, marketing, and positioning. So this has been important, particularly since amalgamation, to really brand the county and get familiarization out there in the region and the broader community. Customer service is also falling under this umbrella. You'll see a lot of initiatives that are going to be launching in 2019 really focused on our customer service. And public engagement strategies. This is important in an environment where there's different methods of communication, including social media, print, website, really being able to reach the broadest audience we can and make sure that everybody has access to the information that we want to get out there. Corporate initiatives. This is a new division within the corporation resulting from the recent reorganization. Will be responsible for working and supporting working with and supporting the CAO in undertaking special corporate initiatives and projects. I'm not going to beat the same drum as everybody else, but obviously we're very proud of our staff and our co-workers. From our division perspective, department perspective, we do have exceptional assets in this community. So we're really ideally positioned at this point to take advantage of those, excel and increase investment and our market success. The way that our division and departments are organized right now, and this has happened relatively recently for the new members of committee, we found has really optimized the staff talent and resources that we have. We're operating very efficiently now and able to offer very progressive services to not only our corporation but to the community at large. Our challenges, again, similar to many of the others, managing the growth in a responsible manner. Creating new services, we have some great opportunities, but they also present challenges in getting those services out to the community. It is increasingly competitive as growth moves from the east out this way. We have rising demands on our services with limited resources, as everyone does, and as I mentioned, the changing communications environment. Some of the strategic initiatives and studies that we're undertaking. The economic development strategy, I'm happy to say that most of you have been participating in the creation of such. So we are getting near the end of that now and hoping to wrap up in Q1 of 2019. Some of the other ones, wayfinding strategy, again, same position. The Downtown Paris Master Plan is also coming to an end, and we are going to begin with the Burford and St. George Master Plans in 2019. The marketing communication strategy was completed and adopted in 2016, and has largely been rolling out in the last year, and again, you'll see new initiatives coming forward in 2019. And contact information, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, Steve.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Can you just detail a little bit the wayfinding strategy?
Sure. The idea of that, particularly since the amalgamation, was all kinds of signs, some of which predated the amalgamation when we were separate settlement areas. They've been put up by different parties. The idea of the wayfinding strategy has a few different objectives. A, to get that positioning and branding of the county to be consistent throughout. We have increased investment and tourism, so to be able to direct people where we want them to go within the county. And for our existing residents as well, to make it accessible and age-friendly so they can navigate throughout the community. And for different aspects of our community, for example, for trails, to be able to easily recognize where those are and where you can continue on them, where you can access the water, where you can get to any of our community centers, etc.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Allison. Thank you for your report here. When you, on the slide of strategic initiatives, you say rapidly rising demands on services being managed by being managed with limited resources. Do you have a plan other than more resources to tackle that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I mean, part of the reorganization has really assisted in that we're able to leverage each other's strengths. So, for example, we're doing a lot more with the communications group that has helped with our marketing efforts and getting out there on social media has very much assisted in that without increasing our resources, just working better together internally. We've also been operating from the economic development and tourism perspective without a strategy in recent years. So having that in place, so we're not, sort of investing resources into areas that may not be prioritization for the county has probably not been an efficient way to be operating. So once that's in place, I think that will really help.
Okay, and thank you very much for that answer, because you just hit on something there that unfortunately we may have been in the past in silos, and it really shows, just like
such as the upcoming OPP, and they did construct the Bryan Sports Complex a few years ago.